I want to thank everybody for joining today. This is first of many workshops to come from the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. We're partnering with Bowers and Company and Empire State Growers to put on this workshop, and today we're joined by Nick Agrippino. He's a tax manager at Bowers and Company, which is a full-service accounting firm based in Syracuse, New York. Nick has direct experience working in the cannabis industry with existing registered organizations, or ROs, and he's overseeing their newly launched cannabis niche at Bowers and Company. Then we also have Jason Menard. He's general counsel for Empire State Growers. He's got an extensive experience in commercial litigation, corporate law, and agricultural law. Jason has dedicated his practice to serving his clients in the emerging hemp and cannabis industries. And my name is Dan Livingston. I'm the managing director of the NYCGPA, and I'll be just doing some technical support on this call. But if folks are interested in supporting the work that we're doing here today with this workshop and the lobbying and advocacy that the NYCGPA does, I would encourage you to join the association by going to nycgpa.org/join and become a member. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to our presenters for the day.
Good morning, and thank you for having us present today on such an important topic. Today we will address an overview of the MRTA, the adult use license types and the nuances of each, application guidance and fundamentals, taxation under the MRTA. Before we get started, one caveat. Today's presentation is based upon the text of the MRTA. Ultimately, the Cannabis Control Board regulations will govern, so the information is subject to change. In the words of the great Wayne Gretzky, we must skate to where the puck is going, not where it's at. This holds true for the New York cannabis market. We must anticipate where the puck is going. The intent and spirit of the MRTA is to promote social equity and create an anti-monopolistic marketplace. 50% of adult use licenses will be awarded to social equity applicants. The law does not prohibit, in fact, the law does prohibit vertical integration, except for medical registered organizations or micro businesses. The overall goal of the equity plan is to promote diversity in commerce, employment, and ownership.
Okay. Jason, can you explain a little bit the Cannabis Control Board and Advisory Board and the role that they're going to play in the industry?
The Cannabis Control Board will set the tone for the industry and shape New York's adult use market. Cannabis Control Board will be comprised of 5 members with an executive director to be appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate and Assembly. There will be 5 other members, 3 designated by the governor, 1 by the Senate, 1 by the Assembly. The Cannabis Advisory Board will work in collaboration with the Cannabis Control Board. There will be 13 members, 7 appointed by the governor, 3 appointed by the Assembly, and 3 appointed by the Senate.
Any idea when the regulations are going to be released?
There's no clear deadline for the Cannabis Control Board to issue regulations. What we do know is that the medical marijuana laws will automatically be repealed within 6 months of formation of the Cannabis Control Board, which implies that the regs will be in place at that time.
Okay. Any idea when marijuana will first be offered for sale in New York for adult use?
According to Senator Liz Krueger, the first adult use sales will be in approximately 16 months. According to Senator Crystal Peoples-Stokes, the first adult use sales will be within 10 months. Some insights on this topic. The tax law does not become effective until April 1st, 2022. Another further insight, is that the first annual report from the Cannabis Control Board is due by January 1st, 2023, implying that sales will start in 2022.
Okay. When will New York residents be able to grow marijuana at home?
The home grow will start within the first 18 months of the first adult use sales.
Okay. And I think this is a big thing in the MRTA. What's the social equity plan under the MRTA?
The board will develop a social equity plan to promote social equity applicants and create gender, racial, and ethnic diversity in the marketplace.
Okay. And who's going to qualify as a social equity applicant?
Those from communities disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition, those who qualify as minority or business-owned entities, distressed farmers, and service-disabled veterans.
Okay, so we have a couple different categories here. What constitutes a woman or a minority-owned business?
Well, the first requirement is that it has to be a small business, which is defined in the MRTA as having less than 100 employees. The second requirement is that the business has to be 51% owned by women or minorities. The ownership has to be real, substantial, and continuing. And the women or minorities have to be able to exercise decisions on the day-to-day operations.
Okay. And what constitutes a distressed farmer under the MRTA?
It has to be a resident or New York entity that meets the small farm classification as defined by the USDA as having gross cash farm income of less than $350,000 annually. Must also file a Schedule F for the last 3 years, be eligible for an agricultural assessment, be disproportionately impacted, including low commodity prices, and at risk for losing farmland due to suburban sprawl, and any other regulations to come down by the Cannabis Control Board. Or in the alternative, to meet the definition of a distressed farmer, you have to be a small farm operator, a New York entity, and be of a community that has historically been underrepresented in ownership of farms.
I think that kind of moves us into our next thing, extra priority. Who's going to be given extra priority within the application process?
Applicants from communities who have been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition, those with income, a medium income of 80% or less than the residents of the country in which it resides, and those convicted personally or who have had a family member convicted of a cannabis crime.
Okay. What kind of extra assistance is going to be given to those applicants?
Well, an incubator program will be set up. The incubator program will provide financial planning assistance, educational assistance, and compliance assistance. Beyond that, there will be waived or reduced application fees. There will be low interest or no interest loans offered to social equity applicants.
Okay, let's get to the application process a little bit. Do we know the number of licenses that are going to be given out?
No, what we do know is that the Cannabis Control Board will determine this. There are no hard caps at this time. We must keep in mind that the main goal is to promote social equity and create a competitive marketplace. What will be taken into account is the number of licenses, the class of licenses issued for that particular geographical area or municipality where the licensee is applying.
And how long are these licenses going to be good for under the first round?
Licenses will be good for 2 years.
Any idea on the fees on those?
The license fees will be set by the Cannabis Control Board. The MRTA states that they may be based upon cultivation or production volume. This implicitly implies contemplating a sliding scale of fees.
Is there a residency requirement for New Yorkers?
There's a soft de facto residency requirement. You have to meet one of the following criteria. You have to have a significant presence in New York via a corporate office. You have to be incorporated in New York, or the majority of members have to be from New York.
Okay. What kind of information is going to be sought during the application process?
The application's racial and ethnic identity, evidence of good moral character, information on the site to be licensed, and the ownership and investment information that is necessary for the board to make a determination.
Okay. And what about like the selection criteria for who's going to be awarded licenses?
This ultimately lies in the CCB, Cannabis Control Board's hands, and the criteria they will be looking at is whether or not the applicant is a social equity applicant. If they're not a social equity applicant, do they have a social equity plan? Do they have the capacity to carry on the licensed activities? Can they comply with the laws and the regulations? Whether or not there's a plan to make contributions to communities disproportionately impacted. If they're non-social equity applicants, do they have access to the land, buildings, and equipment for the licensed activities? Their ability to control the illegal diversion of cannabis, the impact of the licensee's activities on the economic market for cannabis, the impact on labor organizations, and the requirement to have a labor peace agreement, which we will get into later. Contributions to communities disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. The likelihood of becoming a public nuisance due to noise and traffic at the licensed premises, the ability to control climate resiliency, and for cultivators and processors, the energy and environmental effects of the licensed activities.
Okay. Can you explain the effective union mandate a little bit?
Yes, the effective union mandate requires that all applicants have a labor peace agreement in place. The labor peace agreement is defined by law as an agreement protecting the proprietary interest of the state, protecting against rioting, picketing, work stoppages, or any other economic interference with the entity. To add to that, the Cannabis Control Board will also take into effect whether or not the applicant has a project agreement in place. Applicants with 25 employees or more should have at least consider entering into an agreement with a trades organization to do the construction for their licensed facilities.
Okay. So let's get into municipal oversight a little bit. How much power are municipalities going to have in this?
Municipalities can only opt out of retail and on-site consumption. They cannot opt out of cultivation, processing, delivery, micro businesses, or registered organizations. If they opt out, they cannot get the tax revenue. They can opt back in. They have to opt out by December 31st, 2021. Municipalities can place time, place, and manner restrictions on retail and on-site consumption licenses. The applicant must submit notification to the municipality between 270 and 30 days prior to submitting their application. And while not dispositive, the board will consider it and it will become part of the record.
Okay. And then who's ultimately going to evaluate the license applications?
The OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management, makes the initial evaluation and recommendations to the Cannabis Control Board. Cannabis Control Board will ultimately make a decision. If denied, the executive director must state in writing the reasons for the denial. While there's no specific appeal process in place by the MRTA at this time, the general provisions of the MRTA suggest that an administrative appeal by way of an Article 78 will be the means to challenge a denied application.
Okay, let's get into the business considerations a little bit. Does the MRTA allow for license amendment, transfer, or signability?
All license amendments and transfers must be approved by the Cannabis Control Board. The Cannabis Control Board can specifically prohibit amendments and transfers within the first 2 years and set specific criteria regarding transfers and amendments. This has big impacts on the New York market and how we are building it. In my humble opinion, I feel this will create for a more stable market, as you will not have pay-to-play entrants that are just in it to flip licenses due to this requirement and possibility. Now, when you look at the restrictions on a social equity applicant can only transfer their license within the first 3 years to another qualified social equity applicant, and it has to be approved by the Cannabis Control Board. If transferred, we're most certain at this point in time that it appears that any interest or loans that were given by the Cannabis Control Board through the incubator program will have to be paid off before the transfer.
And once someone has a license, will they be able to pledge that as collateral for loans?
No, the license will not be able to be pledged as collateral for a loan. And at this juncture, I'm going to turn it over to Nick Agrippino, Senior Tax Advisor at Bowers and Company, to discuss the adult use license types and the nuances of each.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Nick.
As far as, kind of laid out on the slide here, we're going to be focusing on the adult use, not really ROs today. So let's get right into it and start with the cultivator license. The sheer definition of this is going to permit the acquisition, possession, distribution, cultivation, and sale of cannabis to licensed processors. Cultivation activity includes growing, cloning, harvesting, drying, curing, grading, and trimming cannabis. So basically everything up to, final packaging and things. Some of the limitations with this license is you can also apply for up to 1 processor license and 1 distributor license, but this is only solely going to be for your own products. So you can't, distribute products from other cultivators. You'll also be able to apply for up to 1 nursery license. There's also language in the MRTA that suggests that you're going to be able to have multiple locations to cultivate, but this hasn't really been set. The pure language of the bill says this is pursuant to criteria established by the board, but we don't really know those criteria yet. However, if one applies for a cultivator and a processor license, the MRTA makes clear that those have to be located on the same premise. You can't hold any interest in a retail license, and you also won't be able to have direct or indirect interest in more than 1 cultivator license.
Nick, are there any unknowns we are waiting for in terms of cultivators?
Yeah, a couple of big ones is indoor versus outdoor limitations. We don't really even know at this point if outdoor is going to be allowed at all. And we really don't know, what kind of the caps on square footage space indoor or acreage outdoor is going to be. Another big one is the MRTA has language that the CCB may create rules for a limited amount of processing without a processor license, but we don't know any kind of those caps that are going to be involved in that. And that kind of moves us into our next license that we're going to go over is the processor license. This is going to permit the acquisition, possession, processing, and sale of cannabis between cultivators and processors. Activities covered under this include blending, extracting, infusing, packaging, labeling, branding, and really anything to do with preparing cannabis products for final sale. Some of the limitations with this license are you may apply for a distributor license, but this is only for your own products. Can't have any interest in retail dispensaries, and you can only have interest in one processor license. Same thing as the cultivator is you're going to be able to potentially be in more than one location, but again, we don't really know those criteria that are going to be established with the regulations on that. Next license we're going to go over is the cooperative. This is going to permit the acquisition, possession, cultivation, processing, and distribution and sale of cannabis to distributors, consumption sites, ROs, and retail dispensaries, but you won't be able to sell directly to customers. So it's pretty much the processor, cultivator, and distributor license all wrapped in one. There's some limitations with this and rules you have to follow, but some of the big ones are you have to be registered as an LLC or LLP, so limited liability company or limited liability partnership, and owners have to be New York State residents. And also this has to be democratically controlled as a 1-to-1 person vote cooperative. And one of the main limitations with this is you won't be able to have interest in more than one cooperative. Moving on to the distributor license, this is going to authorize the acquisition, possession, distribution, and sale of cannabis from the licensed premises of other license holders. So basically moving products from point A to point B. You won't be able to have any interest in any micro business, this retail dispensary or on-site consumption licensee or any ROs. Any distributor with an interest in a cultivator or processor license can only distribute cannabis or cannabis products cultivated and or processed under that license. So what this means basically is nothing at this time in the MRTA suggests that if you are only handling the distribution side of things, that you can't apply for more than one distributor license. And it pretty much just doesn't say that you can't. But that's definitely an assumption at this point. Retail dispensary license is going to authorize the acquisition, possession, sale, and delivery of cannabis from the licensed premises of the retail dispensary by such licensee. And this is directly to cannabis consumers. If you have a retail dispensary license, you're not going to be able to hold any other license, basically. That's all you get. But you will be able to have up to 3 adult use retail dispensary licenses. One of the big zoning limitations with this is you won't be able to be within 500 feet of a school or within 200 feet of the house of worship. So this is pretty in line with how New York State treats alcohol facilities right now. And the store must be located at street level entrance. So you won't be able to be on like the second or third floor of the building. Also, as part of the application process, you're going to have to demonstrate the ownership or possession of real estate within 30 days to the final approval of the license. And this is going to be through a lease, management agreement, or any other agreement. And it's got to be at least as long as your initial license period. So that 2 years that Jason spoke about earlier.
Nick, does this requirement make it impractical for social equity applicants to apply for a retail license?
It does. So the MRTA kind of calls for social equity applicants that they only need to have a plan in place and not an actual agreement. But in order for that to work, the regulations are going to have to lay out how that's going to work. So, kind of an idea that I was thinking of is, you're going to have these applicants have access to those incubator funds and, have a soft acceptance of a license. So that they can use those funds in order to secure real estate. Because really at the end of the day, securing real estate within 30 days, if you don't have the funds to do it, I mean, that's going to be hard enough to do without, with funds, closing on that in 30 days. The next license we're going to go over is the micro business license. So this is the only, vertically integrated seed to sale license that adult use can get, aside from ROs. We don't really know about the size, scope, and eligibility because that's going to be determined by the board within the regulations. If you have a micro business, you can't have any interest in any other license. And you can only sell your own products. So you can sell that to dispensaries or you can sell it on your own, but you can't sell products of, other cultivators or anyone else. Delivery. This is going to authorize the delivery of cannabis and cannabis products by licensees independent of another adult use cannabis license. The MRTA calls that you can only have up to 25 individuals. So that's important, that language. So this means employees and contractors providing full-time paid delivery service to cannabis consumers per week. So an important point with this is it specifically says full-time equivalents in the law. So just a quick example, if you have 50 employees who are working an average of 20 hours a week, that puts you at that 25 head count. So it's not just a hard head count, it's actually, 25 equivalent full-time employees. You can't have direct or indirect controlling interest in more than one delivery license. And this is an important point too, that if you have a dispensary license, you won't need a delivery license in order to provide these services. So a retail dispensary will be able to deliver just as, someone who only holds a delivery license. Nursery license. This is going to authorize the production, sale, and distributions of clones, immature plants, seeds, and other agricultural products, specifically for the planting, propagation, and cultivation of cannabis by licensed adult use cultivators, cooperatives, micro businesses, or ROs. A cultivation license, cultivator can apply for up to one nursery license. I think I mentioned that earlier. And the scope of the nursery license is very brief in the MRTA, and we don't really know, any kind of square footage or anything that's going to be allowed if you have a nursery license. On-site consumption. The bill provides that the provisions of New York health law restricting smoking or vaping of cannabis shall not apply to adult use on-site consumption premise. Same thing as a retail dispensary. You can have interest in up to 3 licenses for these on-site consumption lounges. You're barred from holding any other type of license if this is what you want to do. Similar zoning restrictions. You can't be within 500 feet of a school or 200 feet of a house of worship. The MRTA specifically says that you can't have anyone under 21 on the premise. So this tells me that you can't have even employees that are under the age of 21 working. And some of the other, limitations with this is it specifically says you can't, commingle alcohol sales or gambling. And they specifically put that language in the bill that says that the board can determine other activities that are disallowed. So chances are they could add more activities that you can't, commingle with this down the line. And very similar issue with the retail dispensary license, that you have to be able to establish real estate within that 30 days. So same issue for social equity applicants, because this is probably a decent license that a lot of social equity applicants are going to pursue. Last license is the laboratory testing license. MRTA was very brief on this. The board's going to approve and permit one or more independent cannabis testing laboratories to test medical cannabis, adult use cannabis, and or cannabinoid hemp or hemp extract. If you are in a laboratory testing license, you can't hold interest in any other licenses.
Nick, I know we're not covering registered organizations in great detail in this webinar, but is there anything you want to address for the audience on this topic?
Yeah, I think a big one that people have to be aware of is that, an RO will be able to have up to 8 medical dispensing sites. With that, they will also be able to apply for up to 3 adult use market sites, but those 3 have to be within those 8 medical dispensing sites. So they don't get 11 total, they still are capped at that 8 total, just 3 of them are adult use. And that's important for people to kind of, monitor who want to get in the adult use market to see exactly where those ROs, are going to be placing those adult use sales. If I had to make a guess, it's probably going to be in, high population areas and metropolitan areas and things like that. And then, Jason, let's get into, now that we've gone over the licenses, what can an applicant do now to position themselves for a successful application?
Yes, Nick, the applicant can get to work. Site selection, MBE, WBE certification, certify that you're woman or minority owned. Develop social equity partnerships. Develop strong relationships within the municipalities you operate in. Environmental stewardship. Get your team together. Be prepared to tell your story. Hire your lawyers, accountants, grant writers, the professionals needed. Disclosure agreements, investment information, ownership structure. Start to think about what license type you want to apply for. Look up the registered organizations that operate in the vicinity of where you want to be licensed. It's all public information. And lastly, but most importantly, probably environmental stewardship. Show that you're doing good by the environment. It's a reoccurring theme that comes up in the criteria for licensees, and we feel it's very important. And at this juncture, we are going to turn it back over to Nick to discuss taxation under the MRTA.
Okay, so just a few things to go over with this. Being a mainly tax guy, we had to throw in some kind of taxation into this. So the bill calls for two forms of taxation. Let's start with the supply chain tax. This is basically when a distributor sells to a retailer. So this tax for flower, it's 0.5 of 1 cent per milligram of the total amount of THC. So basically 0.5 penny per milligram of THC. For concentrates, it's 0.8 of 1 cent per milligram of THC. And for edibles, it's 3 cents per milligram total THC. Really an important point with this, because this kind of also plays into license choice. So, a micro business or an RO kind of has a little bit of an advantage with this tax because they are the distributor and the ultimate selling to consumers. So, whereas if a distributor is selling to a dispensary for ultimate sale, they're going to have to collect this tax, and that's going to kind of be holding cost per se for those retail dispensaries. Whereas the micro business or RO who's doing seed to sale isn't going to have to, submit those taxes until they actually make the final sale to a customer. So just a quick example with this, if you have 50 pounds of inventory for 20% THC flower, this is going to result in about $22,400 in taxes. So that's a decent amount of holding costs that, you're going to have to kind of eat until you ultimately sell it to a customer and figure that into your prices.
Where'd the idea of a supply chain tax come from, Nick?
I think there's definitely a couple opinions where it came from. I know Illinois does something similar to it, but with New York State, in my opinion, it's right on par with alcohol. That's exactly how New York State charges excise tax on alcohol. It's based on percentage of potency, and it kind of goes with that. The idea, I don't necessarily agree with it, that taxing based on potency is going to be geared toward temperance and not encouraging people to use products as much that New York State might kind of deem unhealthy. Again, no opinion on that, but that's where I think it comes from. And really, what this has caused is, one, a lot of complexity that people are going to have to make these calculations, and two, for flour, I don't think that's horrible, but it definitely caused higher effective tax rates for anything like concentrates and edibles. So, and then the second point of sale taxes is a lot more simple, is, the final sale to customers is going to be a 13% total tax. 9% of this is going to go to the state. 4% of this is going to go to local, and 1% out of that 4% is going to go directly to the county, and the other 3% is going to go to towns and villages.
How does this compare to other states, Nick?
Comparatively to other states around the country, I'd say the taxation is somewhere in the median to upper median compared to other states. With that being said, I really think it's important to really look at our neighboring states, mainly because that's ultimately what's going to drive the economics and potentially take revenue away from the state. Compared to Massachusetts, I think the flower tax is, combined with the point of sale tax is pretty much on par. But this is really tough to compare because Massachusetts has a flat tax and New York State has added this THC tax into the mix. So it really depends on the potency of the product, and you're not comparing apples to apples when it comes to that. But really, if you run the numbers, unless you're talking about products with, as far as edibles and concentrates go, unless you're talking about products with incredibly low amounts of THC, we're definitely higher as far as an effective tax rate goes for those products. Moving on, if you haven't already heard about this, you will soon enough if you want to get into the cannabis industry, is IRC Section 280E. Without getting into too much detail, we could probably put on a 3-hour webinar just on this. This is a federal code section that limits the deductions and tax credits for those in the marijuana industry. This is due to marijuana still being listed as a Schedule I drug federally. So kind of along with choosing your license, you have a lot of entity structure choices, and that goes hand in hand with income tax planning. But again, a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation. But there's a lot of stuff to think about, not only what license you want, but, planning around this and, knowing the tax ramifications of if you want to do this, what's the result going to be? And then, that's the federal side of things. And, going into the New York State tax side of things a little bit, New York State's been traditionally pretty generous as far as agricultural manufacturing goes. There's a lot of tax credits available, lower effective tax rates for corporations. But the one thing, it was one of the first things I looked for in the MRTA, was if New York State is going to conform to 280E. Basically, how a lot of things in New York State tax law works is New York State conforms to the federal law unless New York State passes a law decoupling from that law. So 280E isn't mentioned at all in the MRTA, and that's definitely really important and something I'm going to keep an eye on. That there's some action needed there that might have just been overlooked completely.
Sounds complex and not one size fits all to planning.
Yep, absolutely. Traditional farm accounting is complex in its own, kind of as the industry is, manifested over the last 5 years and, other states, we kind of see these states starting to, have clawbacks and improper deductions and things, not only for income taxes, but for sales tax purposes. And, especially for New York State, kind of just going back quick to the supply chain tax, it's important to understand that, if you goof a calculation and, you don't submit as many taxes as you're supposed to, there's two things, in my opinion, you don't want to screw around with, and that's payroll taxes and sales taxes in New York State, because, it's going to be 2 years down the line because New York State is up against that 3-year statute of limitations. So a lot of interest and penalties can definitely accrue over that 2 years when they finally decide to take a look at it and see. So it's important to have your ducks in a row.
Well, we want to thank everybody for listening. And at this time, we're going to open it up to questions. And Dan Livingston from the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Associations will be fielding the questions and asking them to us.
Michael Bowers, you can go ahead and ask your question.
All right. So, pertaining to licenses, for the retail license, delivery was brought up as well under the retail license. So you don't have to get a separate license, the separate delivery license if you have a retail license, or do you have to do both?
Nope, just a retail license, and you'll be able to do delivery services under that license.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Lauren Force, you can ask your question now.
Hi, thank you. Can you stack a micro business with a lounge space?
No, no, ma'am. Thank you for the question, Lauren. If you have a lab, it's the only license you can have.
With a lounge,
Oh, a lounge.
not a lab.
No. At this time, what we know from the MRTA, you absolutely cannot do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're unmuted, Laura. You can ask your question now.
Oh, sorry. For the social equity applicants, must they officially be certified as MWBE businesses? Because that seems to take a long time in New York State, longer than a year.
From the text of the MRTA, to be a social equity applicant, the definition is to be 51% owned by women or minority. Therefore, if you can prove that 51% ownership, you meet the definition as it stands today under the MRTA. This is all subject to the Cannabis Control Board regulations that will issue further guidance. It does take time, you're 100% correct, to get the certification. But I would get started on it. It will help the process and help your chances of getting a license. But my humble opinion, at this juncture, pursuant to the text of the MRTA, it's not necessary or required.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, thanks, gang. I'm sure the information is not there yet, but wanted to at least ask if the micro business license square foot cap would pertain only to the cultivation areas or encompass the entire business footprint, processing, office space, warehousing, etc.
You want to take it, Nick? Or me?
I think you're right. We just don't know yet, really.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something that, yeah, that's going to need to be hashed out in the regulations for sure.
Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Hey, how you doing? So my name is Emmanuel Watts. I'm actually a lab processor. I'm a grower. I'm a business consultant for cannabis. I do it in multiple states all over the country. My question is I'm actually originally a New York State resident. As soon as they recreationalized, I just moved back from doing a 3-month consult in Oregon at a lab, a Delta 8 lab. And my question is there a way to get on the board? Because I think a lot of these regulations are trash and they do not go along with any of the other states. I think as far as like, the whole delivery license and distributorship, there just needs to be a Bureau of Narcotics in the state of New York that every single person in cannabis can apply for their own personal license. It usually costs about $100 in every other state. And that way, every person in the industry is legally allowed to distribute for a company if they have to, as far as deliveries and things like that. That right there can cut down on so much hassle and make life so much easier in the job of cannabis, for one. Two, also, I think the nursery licenses just need to be included in cultivation because that's just New York trying to make extra money for no reason when every other state charges literally like, what is it? Like, I think it's $1 a square foot for a nursery license to add on to a cultivation. So I just think some of these things are kind of they're complicating. But I don't know if there's a way that you guys know that I could get on the board or somehow, some way, something like that. I would love to because I have years of experience in cannabis as far as the worker and the actual, employee as well, or the consultant, whoever, and like my experience is is literally all the way around. So if you guys know a way that I can be put onto this board or somehow, you know, involved a little bit more to be able to help the actual common person achieve their goals in cannabis, I would love to.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Duly noted. Do you plan on applying for any license in New York?
Emmanuel, you're muted.
Sorry. So as of right now, I don't know if I'm going to have a license in my name. I most likely will have a processor's license. But mainly I'm going to be consulting for people that I know that want to build their businesses. And so really I'm going to be focusing on helping build businesses under different licenses. So that way I can network everybody together to be able to have a continuous flow of business and not fall on their face. And I want to see people.
So to answer your immediate question, Emmanuel, if you're applying for a license, you can't be on the Cannabis Control Board because you can't have an interest in the industry. Period.
Understandable. So if I do not personally own a license under my name, I can still be on the board.
You could throw your hat in the ring. You know what I'm saying?
And so how would that work exactly? How do I go about that?
There's no blueprint or play call, playbook. You know, it's political at this point.
Gotcha. I figured as much.
That's the bottom line.
One more thing with that too, not only having your own license, but there's that language of indirect interest in other licenses too. And that's very broad and we really don't know what that means yet. So I mean, even having
right
interest in consulting services could disqualify you.
Right. And so what I mean by that is my interest in all these businesses is, put it this way, let's say I go to a lab and they're not compliant. They're not built out to be safe. They're not built out to safely house employees or do work. And that's my job. I come in and I fix all of it. And then usually I, invite the fire marshal to come look at it. He approves it. And then he's most likely going to use me as a reference or an example to another existing business that needs help in getting compliant and safe. And just certain things like that. I actually, I care about the plant medicine. I am a patient myself. And so I strive to make the cleanest possible medicine. That's what I do. I help people get their processes in order, everything correct. And so I actually just care about it because at the end of the day, I'm also out there doing patient education. I'm out there, helping people. So and then, no matter what, it all has to start from somewhere. And if it's starting at somebody's business, it's going to end at a consumer in a retail level eventually. And it's like, so that's my biggest thing is I just help people out to make sure that everything going to the end user is worth their money for one and, actually correct medicine.
Appreciate you, Emmanuel.
George, you can speak now.
Yes, how are you guys? I joined a little late. I'm not sure if you covered this. In terms of retail locations, will retailers be able to purchase from nurseries seeds and clones to sell to consumers for home grow purposes?
No, the only sale that will be permitted will be from a licensed nursery to any other licensed grower, micro business, registered organization, and that covers it.
So for a home grower looking to grow to purchase,
you're not going to be able to sell seeds from a retail location. As the
Okay,
MRTA reads right now, the only sales are from nurseries.
Only sales are from nurseries. Okay, and then for the delivery, you covered that already. Retailers will be able to deliver in-house,
Yes,
like a
sir.
pizzeria delivering pizza.
Indeed.
All right, thank you, guys.
You're welcome, George.
Mark Bivona, you can speak now.
Hi, guys. Thanks very much. I wanted to know, is the license for a retail license, which I have, does that also include a distribution license or delivery license? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so that's all in one. So if I have the license already, I also have the delivery license, correct?
That's how the MRTA reads right now.
Yep.
Great.
And if you have a retail license, you don't even need to apply for delivery license. You'll be able to do that without the delivery license, just under that
Perfect.
retail dispensary license.
Perfect. Thank you.
Megan, you can speak now.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to confirm, did you say that the micro businesses will only allow retail sale of products that was produced, processed by that company?
Yep. You won't be able to sell under a micro business license that is strictly your own products. You won't be able to, buy products from another cultivator or processor and sell those. It's just yours.
Okay, thank you.
David Ingram, you can ask your question now.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I missed the unmute button. Just curious if there's any knowledge or even a guess as to what might be the cost of application fees and or license fees at this point?
Yeah, so we can only go off the text of the MRTA. MRTA suggests a sliding scale of fees based upon cultivation and production volume. That's the extent of what we know, and there's nothing more on it in the MRTA. So until there's further guidance from the Cannabis Control Board, we can anticipate a sliding scale. As it states, they may base it upon cultivation and production volume, the fees.
Got it. Thank you.
And and one more point with that too, if you're a social equity applicant, there's language that suggests that they may waive or reduce fees or waive them entirely, but we don't know that yet, or what the criteria for that is.
Would there anybody sort of have a kind of finger in the air sense of, well, gee, maybe we should look towards, say, what they did in Michigan or California as kind of a model to go by? I know that's crazy to think.
Well, to answer your question, what New York is doing is trying to pull the best out of what has worked in other states and not using what has not worked. So we will see how this all comes together. A lot of pressure on the Cannabis Control Board to roll this out right. It's going to be very intense, similar to the hemp regulations. We're first in class in the nation, very comprehensive. A lot of obligations on the operators. Anticipate anything different for New York adult use market.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome, David.
Jason, you can unmute yourself.
Thanks. My question was about outdoor cultivation, and you briefly touched on it, but how likely is it going to be that they will allow outdoor cultivation? Do you have any further insight?
At this point in time, from everything that we're hearing, they do recognize the necessity for outdoor cultivation, to reduce the carbon footprint, which will in turn make up for all of the carbon emissions that are going to increase tenfold due to the indoor facilities of the registered organizations that are going up daily, that they are positioning themselves for. So there does appear that outdoor will have a place at the table. What that cap on acreage is going to look like and the rollout, how it's going to be compared to square footage for indoor, the equity behind it all, we don't know the definites, but that's what we know from now.
Awesome. Thank you for that further info.
You're welcome, Jason.
Sunny Patel, you can ask your question now. Unmute yourself.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. Maybe I missed it when we first started. When does the application release, or when do we anticipate it to release?
The MRTA there is no deadline for the Cannabis Control Board regs, which would, form the process to set up for applications. So there's literally no timeline. They have not appointed the Cannabis Control Board as of yet. Supposedly, the rumor is that they were meeting sometime after July 4th, the assembly, on this very topic. When and whether that happens is beyond the scope of this, but I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question.
Why? why is it taking so long for the board to kind of?
Certain folks have declined to take the executive director position. It's very political at this point, and that's the extent of what I know.
My second last question is the consumption. Can you have that license with a retail license, or is that not possible?
Nope. Only consumption. That's the only, if you have an on-site consumption lounge, that's all you're going to be able to have an interest in.
And customers cannot bring product home, right? From the consumption.
I would assume not. I think it's going to be treated similar to alcohol, where, if you buy it, you consume it on site, and you can't, just the same that you can't, walk out with an open container of alcohol. But that's strictly an assumption. We don't really know that yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all.
Jeanette, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, hi. My question is, can a retail license grow their own products as well as sell other products, or do they have to only purchase from another distributor or grower?
If you're a retailer, you won't be able to have interest in any other, in a cultivator license or anything. Probably where you would be gearing toward would be a micro business license so that you can grow your own products and sell that. But the caveat to that is you can only sell your own products. You won't be able to sell products from other cultivators.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gina.
Doug, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, and I appreciate the opportunity. A lot of good information. This is a question for Jason. Jason, I'm a broker in the space. So 9 Point Strategies, risk management, and I'm curious to know if there's been any discussion or consideration of insurance requirements, for example, for general liability and product liability.
MRTA does not specifically mandate any specific dollar amounts in terms of insurance requirements at this time.
Okay. That's
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, thank you.
Oscar, you can ask your question now.
I have a question about the micro business. Can I use other genetics, or can I have to create my own genetics?
You don't, Oscar, you don't have to create your own genetics. As a micro, you can buy from a nursery starts to get your business going and go from there. Does not have to be your genetics.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Oscar.
Anthony, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Hey, thanks for having us today. Anthony Kazmarek and Sandra Stevens from Greenleaf Wellness Company in Schenectady. Been open since 2018. Sandra actually has a quick question.
Thank you, gentlemen. Wonderful seminar. Hope you'll have many more. I own 2 women-owned businesses, and I have some questions about women-owned being allowed to access to the incubator, even though we're blessed to have a successful CBD clinic, an award-winning clinic. We humbly say, I just wondered if I will have access, and other women like myself who have been, say, S corporations in the state of New York, will we have access to the incubator? Will be based on our income tax?
Two requirements. You have to be 51% owned, women owned. So if you satisfy that one, you're good. Second requirement needs to be a small business, less than 100 employees.
Okay.
Those are the 2 requirements that we're aware of now based upon the text of the MRTA and gaining assistance from the incubator program. It's very
Okay.
broad language that the incubator program is set up to help social equity applicants. And a social equity applicant is defined as a woman-owned business. And the woman-owned business definition is what I just stated.
And we are 100% woman-owned. And my other question for all of us out there, applying to all of us, do you have any idea what they might be considering as far as ratios for employment of minorities? We employ, LGBTQ, we employ women, Blacks, Hispanics, et cetera, Brown. Do you know if there's going to be any ratios of requirement in order to get the license? That would be my last question.
Well, there's no absolute requirement. The stated goal of the equity plan is to create diversity in commerce, ownership, and employment, quote unquote, employment. So one of the criteria will bode well for you is that you employ many minority and other genders, etc.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
You're
And
welcome.
one more quick thing with that too, assuming you do get a license, when the reapplication process, 2 years down the road, one of the things that they're going to look at in the reapplication process is what you've done for exactly what you just said, supporting social equity and things like that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Look forward to the next seminar. Thank you very much from all of us.
You're welcome, Sandra. Anthony.
Hi, guys. Thank you for the seminar. It's so great. Thank you for answering everybody's questions. My name is Kim Stuck. I'm the founder of Allay Consulting. We're a compliance consulting firm. And I was wondering, because of the CBD regulations that are out right now, that are kind of in holding pattern, they're requiring GMP certification for all licensed applicants in the facility already existing or going into 6 months in. And so our company has been helping people with GMP certification forever. I was just wondering if there was any talk of putting that into the regulations for THC as they have in Michigan and Florida and a few other states.
Yes, without a doubt. I'm not 100% certain of talk, but anything New York puts its hands on, in my opinion, you can count on them requiring GMP, especially when you go from CBD to cannabis. The implications are strong, and it's required for CBD. Department of Health has made it a point to make it a major requirement, and it's all under one house. The Office of Cannabis Management now controls cannabinoid hemp, marijuana, medical marijuana. So I think it's very safe to assume that any manufacturing facility at a bare minimum to operate will have to be GMP, or quite frankly, it will just be denied.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I felt. I just wanted to see what you guys thought. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Kim.
Looks like, we got another question. Do you guys want to do one more, or we are a little bit over noon? It's up to you.
Go ahead, Dan.
One more? Okay.
If more come in, maybe we'll cut it off at this one though.
Go ahead, Hector. You've got to unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Hello, hi, good afternoon. Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hector.
Yes, I got a question, right? So when we can start, like, let's say, registering a corporation, LLC, or, any entity, it got to be when they, I guess, announce or deliver how everything is going to lay out, or, can we just register, like our company, like, we can start working on that as of now?
I think you should start working on it now. Yeah, there's nothing stopping you from establishing a business right now, just because the application process isn't, open.
Got you. Okay, and my pretty much last question. So with the cultivator license, that's the only license that you can, apply for, right? There's one, I forgot which one you said that you can, I guess, apply for different licenses under the same roof.
Yes, you can have a cultivator, processor, and distributor license all under one roof.
Cultivator, processor, and what?
And distributor.
Okay, got you. All right, guys. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hector.
All right, yep.
All right, well, thanks for everybody for attending. We enjoyed it. We hope you did. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone.